Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can paint buttercups with watercolor in loose watercolor style. So let us start with materials required. I'll be using this 300 GSM watercolor paper, which is rough in texture. It is a handmade paper actually. For paints, I'll be using my palette, which is quite dirty, you can see. So the colors that I'll be using for this project are in tube colors. They are light yellow, this yellow ochre, burnt sienna, flatter green, and light green. These are from Brushwork. You can use any watercolors you like or you have. So let us start with the sketch overview of the buttercups that we are going to paint today. I'll be painting it in a few different angles so that we can paint it together in a bunch. It will be really helpful if we paint it in a few angles, because in a bunch they are obviously not going to face the same way. As much as I hate sketching, I must admit that they are a very helpful tool when it comes to painting, because if you don't understand the general structure of what you are painting, you cannot paint it very well. In order for the brushwork to work really well, you have to know the general structure of it first, so that the brush easily glides on paper, because now you have the idea on what you can paint. You do not have to look up to the reference again and again and just trying to copy it as it is. If you know what it is like in general structure, it will be very easy and helpful for you. The sketch that we are doing right now doesn't have to be very high end, as we are just trying to focus on the main shape right now. As you can see my sketch right now, it is not very detailed. I am just trying to make the main structure of the flower and looking at where I have to position the petals and the gaps in between them. I am just trying to build the general structure of it, not going into the details a lot. I would recommend that you look for many pictures on, let's say, Pinterest or Google. You can find many good pictures of the certain subject you are trying to paint, and only after that you start painting after finding the perfect picture. Do not rely on a single picture from only one place. Just make sure that all the parts of the flower are present in the reference picture that you have taken, and it is very clear, so that you understand where every element is placed in the botanical. Here the flower is quite tilted, so the stamen is placed differently, but the structure of the stamen is quite similar to what we have done in the first one. So talking about the leaf of this flower, it is quite complicated. So to start out, I start with the veins first, so that I have an idea on where to make the rest of the leaf. Now this is the part where the fun begins. So we are starting with the brushwork. You can see I am holding the brush in an angle. My hand is not straight up, it is quite bent, and with no pressure on my hand and holding the brush in the lightest way possible, I am just sweeping the brush on the paper. I am not exerting any pressure on the brush. It is very light-handedly held by me. I am adding these few extra strokes to the flower. I feel like they really give a very nice look to the flower, so I always add them. Here I am making one more flower and I am just making sure that these do not touch each other. Okay, so I again brought up this sketchbook because I wanted to show something. Most of the people will just first do an outline like this and then go in with the brush and drag the color or go in with a different color. See, when you do this, what happens is there is a rough edge around. Feel like the edge that is created here gives a more childish look than a more natural and authentic look, so I do not prefer that, but if you like it, you can totally go with it. At this point, I am just mixing these two petals that are present down here. I am just merging these two petals into one petal. You can approach it however you like it. I'll just make a few more flowers here and there, and then we can start painting the stem. Coming to the stem with the light green color mixed with a little bit of yellow ochre, I am just painting the first layer of the stem. Right now I am just placing and looking at where else I can make the stem. I am not finalizing it. This is not actually the final product. We are going to layer it a bit because only a single wash of color doesn't look very nice to me. By making stems first like this, I get a brief idea of where I have to place my buds because there were quite a few buds in this flower, and if I want to make any further flower to fill in the composition, I can just place it after I make the stems. Now I am making the birds. So the first task is to place the birds in the right place, and then we are going to add any amount of details we want. But now we have to focus on placing the birds one thing at a time. On my brush, I have loaded up a mixture of light green and the burnt sienna, and I'm just going over the stems just a little bit on the side on every stem so that we get a little bit of detail. It's not a lot, but I can assure you that this really makes a difference. Now you can see that the stems are not just a single flat color. Now we are going over the buds. So the buds are not quite dry, so we get a little bit of wet on wet moment here. The color that I have used here will just fade away. It will look very less saturated as soon as it dries because of wet on wet. Here I am adding details to the flower, so you can look up to your reference and detect the shadow areas and just add the darker color there, or you can just do what I'm doing right here. Doesn't have to be complicated at all. You will just have to choose a darker color, a color that is darker than the flower that you have painted, and you just go over the shadows area. There are many different ways in which you can add details. This is just how I like to add details. Once it's dries, I just go with a pointed round brush, and using the tip of it, I just tag my brush on the shadow areas. This middle area of the flower had a little bit of green in it, so what I'm going to do is take a mixture of green and yellow ochre and go over the areas. I think this is too bright. What I'm going to do is clean the brush, dry it, and I'm just going over the paint areas. It will just soak up the paint and we will get a lighter area. So for the stamen part, I just mixed a little cadmium orange to the yellow ochre to get this shade. I had initially decided that I'll go with the yellow ochre, just the yellow ochre for the stamens, but because I used it for the detailing part, I just cannot use it because it will not show up. So I needed a different shade and I mixed the cadmium yellow and it just works fine now. So for the stamen, you are just going to make some lines and ovals. You can first make the oval and then join it to the flower. The bud is quite dry now, so we are once again going over the bud with the details. Because the initial details became less saturated, we are just going over it once again to emphasize it. Now comes the leaf part, so I'm just going to make it very roughly. I'll do a little color play, otherwise the form will be very simple. I do not want the focus of the viewer to shift towards the leaves more, so I'll be painting it in the background rather than the foreground. now I'm going to make the background for this piece. So unlike me, you will just have to spread it around the painting, not on the painting. I did it by mistake. So now with a brush, I'm just going to spread the water all over. I'll just go with a little bokeh effect for this one. This background step is not really mandatory, so you can just skip it and your painting will still look good. But I just wanted my subject to pop really well, hence I went with the background. With white gouache loaded on my brush, I'll just tap on my brush and get this splash of white. So now we have come towards the end of the video. This is what the final project looks like, and I hope you really liked it and enjoyed the whole process. If you did, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.